Welcome everybody. Mr. Everett, Sandwich High School, APUSH History. So we're actually going to jump right into thesis statements. And thanks again to Keith Wood at Murray High School in Murray, Utah. Someday I'd like to know where eventually that is. But let's jump right in. So let's talk about thesis statements. So most important sentence, okay? It's the most important sentence in any essay. It must be clear, properly structured, and in the correct place. And, by the way, thesis statement or a thesis sentence, it's always good practice to underline it, you know, just to make sure the people who are grading your APUS history essays don't miss it, as well as me. So, thesis sentence is a single declaratory sentence that answers the prompt with a clearly and simply stated opinion that does not restate the prompt. Okay, so how exactly do you write this super powerful, all-encompassing single sentence? Well, let's take a look. So, after reading the whole prompt, marking verbs and conjunctions, and sketching out how you intend to proceed, and if you remember we talked about that in the last video lecture, you're going to answer the prompt in a simple sentence. So, for instance, consider the following DBQ prompt. And we talked about this prompt a little while ago in the past lecture. How successful was organized labor, meaning unions, in improving the position of workers in the period from 1875 to 1900? Analyze the factors that contributed to the level of success achieved. So, let's take a look at this one. What do you think about this prompt? So, were the labor unions successful in improving working conditions and the power of working people during this time? That's an important question to ask. I mean, if we go back and take a look at the question is, how successful was organized labor in doing this? And then they want you to analyze the factors that contributed to the level of success achieved. So that could be, you know, very little success. It could be super lots of success. Okay? At the end of the period, have the lives of working people substantially improved due to organized labor? Well, it could be that they improved, but not specifically due to unions and organized labor. I mean, the standard of living could have improved. New laws could have been passed. Sanitation, I mean, lots of things. So what factors caused or stopped improvement from happening? So your opinion here or your position here is essential. And your opinion must be clear. So let's say that you think the time period was not a period of labor success. Write a simple statement that answers the prompt with your opinion like this. So, labor unions failed to improve the conditions of working people at the end of the 19th century, or government antagonism to labor unions kept them from effectively helping working people during this period. Notice in both statements you're stating that you do not think this was a period of labor success. So it's extremely important to get your thinking clearly into a simple answer to the prompt. Do not restate the wording of the prompt. So rather than, quote, the time period of 1875 to 1900, write the last decades of the 19th century, or the 3 decades following the Civil War. And rather than organized labor, refer to labor unions. Okay? And it may seem that these are petty changes, but really they're not, and they can help structure and organize your writing, as we'll see a little bit later on. So, you're going to choose a thesis structure. The key to writing a strong thesis is to answer or address the prompt with your opinion or, like I like to say, position clearly in front of you. And I don't like to say opinion because opinion is like I like ice cream versus I like cabbage. Okay? But a position that you have can be supported by evidence. And that may just be semantics, but it's a preference I have. So, they need you to decide what shape your thesis sentence should take. Your thesis will provide the reader's first and guiding impression. So, give great care with this sentence! Exclamation point. So, let's talk about how to do that. 2 excellent ways of writing a thesis sentence are a concept thesis or an organizational thesis. Okay, sometimes it's known as an organizational statement. So let's talk about the concept thesis first. Now that you have your opinion, you can write a sentence that is both complex and specific. And it may not seem easy to do, but we'll walk you through it. One way of doing this is to write a sentence that begins with the word although. And although this may seem odd, it really does make sense. So, recent AP grading rubrics award high scores only to essays that address the complexity of the question. So let's talk about how that works. So a thesis statement written like this may look like this. Although this was a period of intense labor pressure, unions failed to make the lives and statuses of workers better. And notice what you're doing here is you are addressing a complexity of this statement. So here's another one. Although this period saw increased labor involvement, state and federal government antagonism kept unions from being effective. And notice how using the word although here has changed what were relatively simple statements into more complex ones. And the simple statements, okay, are right here. Labor unions failed to improve the conditions, and government antagonism to labor unions kept them from effectively organizing. Okay, so let's go on again. This kind of thesis sentence sets you up from the very beginning to acknowledge the complexity in the essay prompt. Your opinion, your answer to the prompt goes in the second half of this thesis after the comma. Okay, this is the point you are going to make, the destination at which you want the reader to arrive. Okay, and here's how it works. Another way of writing a clear thesis is to use an organizational statement, which is different from a concept statement. Okay, this is a sentence that specifically mentions what will be the topics of the following body paragraphs. So, for instance, you would use commas here. So what's the prompt? Here it is again. How successful was organized labor in improving the position of workers from the period of 1875 to 1900? Analyze the factors that contributed to the level of success achieved. So, some essay prompts lend themselves to organizational thesis sentences. For instance, consider the following prompt. Okay. Analyze the factors that contributed to the success or failure of organized labor's efforts to improve the position of workers during the period 1875 to 1900. An organizational thesis for this prompt could specify which three things were going to be discussed without restating the prompt. So, how can we do that? So the following sentences specifically mention what the topic sentence of the next will be the topic sentences of the next paragraphs. And if you remember in your English classes, topic sentences are the first sentences of paragraphs, and they are kind of like mini thesis statements. They help guide the writing of the paragraph. Labor unions failed because they were confused in their goals and were aggressively opposed by both state and federal governments, and labor unions were unsuccessful because they were not unified in their demands and were associated with radical European political groups. Both of those would be excellent topic sentences for the paragraphs that could help you in an organizational thesis. So whether you choose a concept thesis or an organizational thesis, this sentence will shape the first impression you make on the reader. Think carefully about your task and make sure your thesis addresses the prompt. Okay, here's another tip. Having written your thesis sentence, you are ready to put it in your essay introduction. For most APUS history essays, an introduction paragraph may only be 2 or 3 sentences in length. And this is because, in truth, you have 15 minutes to prepare your response and 45 minutes to write. And you're probably not going to be focused on writing a flowery or a nice introduction. You're probably going to want to jump right into the thesis statement and then start outlining your paragraphs. So the thesis sentence should be the last sentence in your introduction paragraph. So take a step back from your thesis and then write a general sentence that introduces your topic. So let's give you some ideas here using the DBQ prompt that we've talked about. The general topic of this prompt is the effectiveness of labor organization. Okay, and if you remember way back when we focused on the prompt here, The intro is how successful was organized labor in improving the position of workers. Okay, so when we talk about your introductory sentence, if you're using a concept thesis sentence, the introduction might look like this. American workers have organized to improve pay and working conditions since the early periods of industrialization. By the end of the 19th century, these unions made a major effort to make the lives of working people better. And here's where you get into your thesis. Although this was a period of intense labor pressure, unions failed to make the lives and statuses of workers better. Okay, in an organizational thesis, it might look like this. American workers have organized to improve pay and working conditions since the earliest periods of industrialization. By the end of the 19th century, these unions made a major effort to make the lives of working people better. They failed, however, since they were unclear in their demands, and both state and federal governments used force to stop them. And notice you have listed two parts of your organizational thesis there. Okay. AP essay rubrics award high scores to essays that have, quote, a clear, well-developed thesis, and that is focused on the prompt and guides the essay throughout. So by clearly answering the prompt with your opinion or position, writing a strong thesis sentence and putting it in the beginning of your essay, you do as much in 2 or 3 sentences as you can do to get yourself off to a great start. And I really do believe that. Okay, a thesis is a single declarative sentence that answers the prompt with your position or opinion. A thesis should address the complexity of the prompt. A thesis should be carefully crafted to fit the demands of the specific essay prompt, and a thesis should be the last sentence in the introductory paragraph. And there we go. Okay,